31 past the hour. Joining us now from Washington, ranking member of the House Select Committee on Intelligence, Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff of California. Also with us in London, editor and writer at The Interpreter for the New York Times, Max Fisher. And joining the table, contributor to Time Magazine, MSNBC political analyst and former aide to the George W. Bush White House and State Department's Elise Jordan, who held down the fort last week. Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate it.
So, Adam, it's always great talking to you. Right now, we want a little bit of clarification. We had David Ignatius on, and others have been talking about how the unclassified report was a bit thin. Others have described it as odd. A lot of conclusions, not a lot of data to back it up. But as David said, the real report comes later on this week when you guys look at it. Is there a chance that Americans are going to have a better understanding of the evidence after you get the full report, the classified report? And how do you get that information out to us?
Well, I've had a chance to review the full classified report, and I completely concur with what you just heard the president say. That is that the sourcing is very strong. The confidence is high, and it's high for good reason. I don't think that the public is going to get much more this week when more of the members get the classified report, because they won't be in a position to declassify that information. But I am hoping that as Congress investigates this, the intelligence committees will, working with the intelligence community, publish more for the public to see. But I do want people to understand that even the report that was put out by the administration, I think it was very important to share as much as they could with the public. The Russian intelligence agencies are going over every line, every period, every comma to figure out how do they know that. They're trying to reverse engineer what they have already to figure out what are our sources, what are our methods. And so there's a real trade-off here. The more we share with the public, the more we're sharing with the Russians, and the better able they'll be to hide in any future meddling in our election or the European elections coming up.
And Max Fisher, that obviously is a great point that the congressman makes. You had tweeted, though, and a lot of people were very concerned that we're reaching out to you, that this report was odd, that things were contained in the report that just didn't seem to so much. And you had said the DNI report is so odd, I worry it will end up undermining facts that are already established by open source methods, e.g. Russian links. David Ignatius expressed that concern. I think Jeffrey Goldberg, to a lesser degree, expressed that concern. So what are we as a public to make of this unclassified report, knowing full well, as the congressman said, that there's just some information and some sourcing we're never going to, and we shouldn't, actually get to know about?
Well, I think that gets to what's so odd about this report is that there is actually a huge amount of information that is out in the public domain tying these hacks and the subsequent influence campaign to the Russian government and to the Russian military intelligence agency. Multiple independent firms, FireEye, Threat Connect, CrowdStrike have all put out reports where you can go and look through from the initial phishing email that got these, went into the DNC and John Podesta's email, every step through the influence campaign. No one that I know can really figure out why none of this information was included in the unclassified DNI report, and why instead the report seemed to include a lot of ancillary information about Russia today that is not really relevant to making this case. So what concerns me is there's an extremely strong case to be made just on public domain information establishing this, and for whatever reason the DNI decided not to make that in the unclassified report.
Elise?
I'd be curious, Max, if you think that this report and just the information that came out strengthens incoming NSA Director Mike Flynn's case that intelligence apparatus needs to be completely reformed. You know, this is kind of what he put forth in his 2010 Afghanistan intelligence report, just saying that so much of the intelligence is worthless, and then the DNI comes out with this report that really doesn't add anything to the discussion. How is intelligence reform proceeding?
Right. Well, so I think that's an interesting point, and that what we have with this report, we haven't seen the intelligence community fail in its actual primary job of supplying intelligence. I mean, it certainly sounds like the classified version includes all of the things that they decided not to include and probably a lot more. What we've actually seen the intelligence community not succeed at this week is public messaging and pushing out against a incoming commander-in-chief who questions not just the intelligence community's findings but basic established facts. That's a very different role that the IC is not accustomed to playing, has not really had to play in the past, and that they're struggling with. I don't see any reason that any of that should support the incoming administration's rationale for wanting to retool the intelligence community, but I think we will see them go down that path. And that's what we're seeing. The real challenge for the CIA and other intelligence agencies is having a White House that is so actively hostile to the role they are supposed to play. They're really not ready for that, and as we can see, they still have a ways to go to get familiar with kind of how to fight that fight.
Congressman Schiff, tell me what, given the seriousness of this incident and the implications of it for American national security and our political process, what is it you'd like to see President-elect Trump do when he becomes president of the United States? In your ideal dream scenario as we go forward on this specific issue, what would you call on him to do to take this as seriously as it should be taken and have and live up to his responsibilities as president of the United States?
Well, it's a great question that I've wrestled with because I have a fundamentally different view of the threat that Russia poses, I think, than what we've heard from the president-elect. But I guess what I'd like to see within the constraints of his interest in trying to improve relations with Russia is to have him say to Russia something like the following. Look, I've got Congress breathing down my neck. They want to add new sanctions. They're on a completely different course than I am. You've got to help me out here. You want any relief in Ukraine, you got to pull your people out of there. You got to stop destabilizing the government. You got to abide by the Minsk Accords. You got to, in Syria, stop bombing civilians. You want to work on a counterterrorism campaign together, fine. But that means it's got to be counterterrorism. It can't be bombing the moderate opposition. So I need you to know, Putin, I'd like a better relationship. I'll show you respect. But here's where our interests lie. Here's where we can work together. And here's where we're going to have to fight you tooth and nail.
Yeah. Hey, Max, let's finish up by talking about Rafsanjani, a fascinating character. I was breaking up with David Ignatius earlier. I think it was Rafsanjani. I mean, just to tell our viewers how long he's been with us, I think it was Rafsanjani who revealed in '86 that Bud McFarlane had delivered a birthday cake in the shape of a key and a Bible in an attempt to find those moderates in Iran we've never been able to find. Rafsanjani was a bit of a moderate, but he was also extraordinarily pragmatic, wasn't he?
Yeah, and that gets to, there's different versions of moderate. Rafsanjani could be, as you were saying earlier, a hardliner's hardliner, but he was non-ideological, or he was primarily interested in pursuing what he saw as the interests of Iran, and there were times when that conflicted with the interests of the United States in ways that were really problematic, and there are times when it lined up with it. And the legacy of that kind of Rafsanjani push I think is going to be really under threat within Iran. They have elections coming this year, and you're going to see a lot of the hardliners who are more ideological, who do want to have, for domestic reasons, external reasons, this kind of endless struggle against the West, kind of reinstitute that from the days under Ahmadinejad.
New York Times, Max Fisher.
Yeah, let me ask really quickly, Adam. I'm sorry, Adam. Really quickly, obviously, it looks like we could have another showdown with Iran coming up with an incoming president who wants to tear up the Iran deal, or at least have a major overhaul in it. And then the passing of Rafsanjani, who could moderate forces inside of Iran. It looks like dangerous days ahead.
They are, but here's what I would suggest that the president-elect do: not tear up the agreement. I think that would be a big mistake, but rather focus on pushing back against Iran's conventional malevolence in the region, work with the Gulf allies to build a much stronger pushback to the Iranian-backed militias, for example. The Gulf nations spend a lot more on defense than Iran does, but they get much less bang for the buck. They put it in very expensive planes instead of people on the ground, and we ought to work with them to push back against that. That doesn't risk a reignition of a nuclear arms race in the region.
All right.
Just hearing that Alex is just new in right now.
Yeah, this on Sunday, NBC confirms that a U.S. Navy destroyer fired multiple warning shots at 4 Iranian ships. That happened on Sunday, so that
there you
back and
go.
forth keeps happening. With
that, the New York Times' Max Fisher, thank you so much, and ranking member of the House Select Committee on Intelligence, Congressman Adam Schiff, thank you.